So a quick cautionary note on the carnivore diet. I had posted a video on YouTube. It's a 51-minute video going over about a dozen human clinical studies showing negative calcium balance just eating meat and the associated fat, or negative calcium balance eating a high animal protein diet not offset with some type of base, right, like bicarbonate or citrate. And that's the real caveat with carnivore, is that it is actually, we need to be very specific on how we say carnivore. This is a modern day carnivore diet. And you might be saying, well, what's the difference between, a wild carnivore and a modern day carnivore? Well, a wild carnivore would have always consumed the fluids, the blood, the interstitial fluid, which is high in bicarbonate. It's about 1,500 to 1,800 milligrams of bicarbonate per liter of fluid, right? And we know the Maasai would actually consume fresh blood, plus they would add milk, which would offset the negative calcium balance that we see in people eating modern day carnivore. So we would also have consumed a lot of that meat fresh, which would have bicarbonate in it. So when an animal dies, the anaerobic metabolism leads to the production of lactic acid, right? Lactate and hydrogen ions. And so the fluids become much more acidic after several hours upon death, and the meat becomes more acidic. There's more protons and the bicarbonate gets depleted. So a wild carnivore, or humans hunting and consuming fresh meat, would have gotten a lot of bicarbonate from the fluids and the fresh meat, which we no longer get. They also, wild carnivores, gnaw on the bone, and the bone has 1.8 million milligrams of bicarbonate forming substances in the forms of carbonate and citrate, and wild carnivores gnaw on the bones. So that would offset the potential negative calcium balance, plus all the carbonate and citrate, which would increase bicarbonate in the body. Also, natural water contains bicarbonate. Tap water has no bicarbonate. Natural waters contain a good amount of bicarbonate, typically anywhere between 200 and 1,800 milligrams of bicarbonate per liter. So I think it's just important to understand the cautionary notes on a modern day carnivore. We should be specific on how we are stating what diet you're on. You're not on a true wild carnivore diet. Most people are on a modern day carnivore diet. So unless you are consuming, the fresh fluids and meat fresh, which also, by the way, fresh meat contains a lot of glycogen. The skeletal muscle contains a lot of glycogen when it's fresh, and so does the liver. And so we see when you look at like lions, hunting in the wild, they consume, they're getting the blood's all over their face. They're consuming, the organs right away, and they're consuming a lot of the meat right away, which would contain a lot of bicarbonate. So unless you are a true carnivore gnawing on bone and consuming everything fresh, you are a modern day carnivore. And that puts you at risk for high acid loads coming into the body, which I've done many videos on how this happens. But essentially, it is important to offset the acid with some type of base when you're on a modern day carnivore diet. I also do believe it's important to consume dairy, particularly either grass-fed milk or yogurt, which grass-fed milk actually brings a slight alkalinity. It's slightly alkaline. The human consumption studies show that. So that it's like one of the animal foods that actually doesn't bring an acid load. It actually has a slightly opposite effect. But that's why I also believe that consuming either grass-fed milk or basically grass-fed yogurt is a good idea on a modern day carnivore diet to avoid the negative calcium balance. But also it's important to offset the acid load with some type of base, which would be low oxalate fruits or vegetables, or things like sodium or potassium bicarbonate or citrate.